When celebrities get in trouble, they go broke. And I think that that's a great strategy to sway public opinion on your side. You also saw some really peculiar situations going to McDonald's after being released, connecting to the public, people taking pictures and selfies. So it looks as if maybe he's looking to garner some sort of sympathy. I was sick to my stomach. I wanted to puke when I saw it. I thought that in 2018 we would not witness the literal rejection of another person's culture. A courageous display by this young man to stand up for his team and decided to win. But we saw at the end when the referee raised his hand in victory after the young man won his match. He threw his hands up, but he immediately put it down because it was a victory on the match, but it was a loss in the culture.
Pretty powerful case. A new number to consider, 24. Those were the entrance and exit wounds of Laquan McDonald's body. There was an expert that testified that Laquan McDonald was moving away from officers, away from bystanders, to not see that it was maybe reasonable to shoot Laquan McDonald. This trial is all about the video. We've all seen it, and the testimony of ballistics experts that said it was deliberate and methodical, that the shots that were in Laquan McDonald, the defense is going to come on the other side. What about Jason Van Dyke's point of view? And maybe the distortion of seeing the distance and maybe flashing police lights. All they have to do is prove reasonable doubt in this case and show the video that you're seeing is not necessarily the vantage point of Jason Van Dyke.
The NFL is seeking to circumnavigate the collective bargaining agreement in order to penalize its players for protesting injustice. It's really interesting that the NFL is now lobbying states to be able to benefit from sports gambling, but on the other hand, is seeking to tamp out voices.
Now you have billboards in major cities. People get to look at Colin Kaepernick's face, get to look at some shoes. What I think it has done is open the floodgates for people to come and have this discussion. And this is also on the backdrop of Colin Kaepernick is not just the center of a social justice conversation. He's not the only person who marched in the streets when Laquan McDonald was shot and killed. He was not the only person with all these other police shootings that have happened and injustices that have happened in our society. There are people that are literally on the ground in the streets yelling, listen to us, hear what we have to say. And society has not been listening to them. And I think with someone like Colin Kaepernick and the issues that are being raised and now having a corporation get behind that and say it's okay to have this conversation, now we can start to really zero in and have that conversation.
Zion Williams would consider making that injury of his knee stretch out a little bit longer than normal. It's funny, Scottie Pippen was criticized for stating that Zion Williams should sit down. Now all the sports writers are now like that meme, like, I don't know, now stating that maybe he should sit out. So I think he should protect himself. He did get an insurance policy for $8 million to protect him if he drops below 16 in the draft.
How much time behind bars could Jesse face?
Carly, great question. Potentially 1 to 3 years. This is for a class 4 felony here in the state of Illinois. People are asking, well, okay, why is it a felony instead of a misdemeanor? That's where the statute is set up in terms of filing a false police report.
What possible defense could he be going with that could combat this?
That's a great question, Jordan. Maybe he approaches maybe his mental state, maybe some sort of substance abuse.
It shows why diversity in government is important. Someone like Kim Foxx, her leadership, being an African-American woman, taking the steps to make sure that this happens, number one. Number two, all the different families that were destroyed and broken by those that are African-American and Latino being arrested. But now we see pot being this big booming industry. We have to make sure that the same individuals have the same opportunities to take advantage of this boon legally as they did.
We talked last time about whether it was even a good idea to have Van Dyke take the stand. Did it work out for him? It did not work out at all. Jason Van Dyke impeached his own testimony, his own defense, by essentially stating that what you saw in terms of the video wasn't what you saw. The defense presented a 3D rendering, supposedly his angle, his perspective. And then when asked about that particular rendering, Jason Van Dyke says that's not what you saw either. And so his testimony looked a little bit less credible, regardless of how emotional he seemed or acted on the stand.
Jury selection is going to be really important in this case. Who's on the jury? making sure that individuals do not know who R. Kelly is, never heard of his music, have not formed an opinion about R. Kelly prior to being interviewed for voir dire.
What do you think is going to happen with jury selection?
Well, important is
Sounds challenging.
It is challenging because on one hand, you want people who've never heard of R. Kelly and his music, right?
How do you do
Which
that?
is uncommon.
Right. Yes, true. But then on the flip side, if you have someone who's never heard of his music, they might not necessarily identify enough with R. Kelly as an individual to form a certain opinion about him in a different way. So it's a tricky
I think
situation.
that it's important for us to understand, why do we have these conversations when we're talking about exceptional women athletes? Why can't they have a space to be able to excel and to be great in their own right and be celebrated as that? Why do they have to be compared with men? Men have their champions, let women have their champions. I don't see anything wrong with that. And for John McEnroe to come and basically diss Serena Williams' whole career. Like, yeah, you're great and all, but you'd be 700th if you were a guy. I would love to see her do exactly what happened in the 70s. Bobby Riggins, Billie Jean King, when he said some things about her, she mocked him.
Yeah.
I would love to see Serena mop the floor with John McEnroe. Shut his mouth up.
Specifically about the NFL anthem policy that was brought down by the National Football League. I talked about this, about the NFL players outflanking the NFL. And we see that policy has not been enforced this year. It's pretty much been put on the back burner by the National Football League. And so the anthem issue has not been a big issue as people thought it would be as the season has waned. We still have the collusion suit that's going on currently by Colin Kaepernick, as well as Eric Reid for the safety for the Panthers, who's now back on the field, who's been randomly drug tested 7 times out of the 11 weeks he's been back, and complained about that, as well as his attorney Mark Geragos for Colin Kaepernick. So this issue is ongoing, but it's not been as big of an issue in terms of NFL owners enforcing their will or bowing down to the president.
Closing arguments can be big. It encapsulates what testimony that jurors have heard and use their recollection of the witness testimony when they're in jury deliberations to determine what type of verdict they'll
Not NCAA tournament in
But
basketball.
why can't it be, JB?
Because some of those other teams that you're trying to squeak in there are going to have no chance of winning, man.
I don't know.
Give them the opportunity to get into the dance and dance in college basketball, dance in college football.
Why couldn't UCF be George Mason?
Thank you.
I've never gotten JP to shut up, but I just did that.